I want your prediction. Where does he go?
I still would have to go with
Inside Scoop Time with Ken, who's been reporting on the destinations for Roki Sasaki and the rejections over the last 24 hours. So, Ken, what is the latest?
There is no latest. We know who the finalists are. I guess that's the latest. And to me, the most interesting thing still is Toronto. And as we reported yesterday, he was in Toronto last week for multiple days, is my understanding. And it would seem that, as you guys were just saying, there is no reason why he would pick the Blue Jays. They are not a great pitching development factory. They have not been, at least in recent years. And it just seems like an odd fit, but who knows? Maybe there is something else going on. I know AJ mentioned perhaps he talked with Kikuchi, and Kikuchi did have a good experience there. I don't know, but I don't know that this is also, as some have suggested, some kind of courtesy or anything like that. The finalists are the finalists, and he could have picked any other teams over the Blue Jays to be that third spot if that was what this was going to be about. I also heard AJ talk about, well, where is the Los Angeles Dodgers right now? Where are the Dodgers? If he had met with the Blue Jays last week and then the Padres over the weekend, there's still time for him to meet with the Dodgers one more time too. Remember, the international signing period opens tomorrow. So it's conceivable he is meeting again with them. It's conceivable also that he knows everything he needs to know about the Dodgers. So we'll see what happens in the next few days. And people will say, well, where do you think he's going? Obviously, that's the question we all have. I don't know the answer to that. The Dodgers have seemed from the beginning to be the most logical destination. But again, it's like with Ohtani when he was a free agent. And it's even like with Soto when he was a free agent. We don't know exactly what Sasaki wants. And maybe his desires have nothing to do with the things that we would assume would be natural desires. Maybe he doesn't care about the ownership strife in San Diego. Maybe he doesn't care that the weather in Los Angeles and San Diego is much better than it is in Toronto. And maybe he doesn't care even that the Dodgers seem to be the team best positioned to accommodate him with a six-man rotation. They're going to have a six-man rotation regardless as Ohtani comes back and some of their other injured pitchers. I don't know the answer to any of these things that are going inside his mind. And ultimately, we're going to find out. We're going to find out shortly. And that's where this stands.
Ken, we went from 30, of course, fakely, to 8 or 9 to 3. And many people have LA, then San Diego's their 1-2. I would say most people, especially when this started, had LA. Some people took a different turn when they heard his representation say how he was really going to consider all options and there's nothing predetermined with the Dodgers. How much of a reputation hit do you think there is, not with Roki necessarily, but maybe with his representation or even just with the league in general, if after all of this, he signed with the Dodgers?
It's a really good question, Scott. And if that happens, I assume fans are going to scream, the fix was in, etc. Well, I don't know that there can be a fix in a situation like this. The Dodgers, like a number of other teams, have been on this guy for years, and they do have certain built-in advantages, or at least perceived advantages. The Japanese players, the two that they have right now being one of them. But again, it's an open process, a fair process, it seems to me. And I don't know, other than an outright bribe or something like that, that would be illegal, you can safely say if he signs with the Dodgers, oh my gosh, that was not right. It's interesting to me, though, that the Padres are one of the finalists too. And they've also been linked to Sasaki from the beginning. AJ Preller is a great evaluator of talent. He also has spent a considerable amount of time in Japan. And let's not forget, Darvish, the godfather of all Japanese players, he is currently in San Diego. And if this kid, Roki Sasaki, wants a mentor, well, who better than Darvish? Now, Darvish has also played for the Dodgers. He's also played for the Rangers. And yes, he probably spoke well, or maybe not, of those teams. But that, to me, would seem to be kind of an inside edge that the Padres have. And his representative, Roki Sasaki, is also the representative for Darvish. It's Joel Wolf of Wasserman. So we all look at these things, we analyze them, we try to figure out what's what. The best answer is we don't know. And we're going to find out real shortly exactly how this is going to play out. But to get back to your question, Scott, no, I don't believe anything untoward would have happened if he ends up with the Dodgers.
All right, I got 3 things for you. They're all kind of quick. 1, I know you, Darvish, loved pitching for the Rangers, especially in 2013. So you don't even have to question that. I know that he loved it. He had the greatest catcher of all time, best
He
numbers with
did.
him of all time. So, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind he loved it, at least in 2013. I can't speak of before or after that. But for that 1 year, he was unbelievable. 2, I want your prediction. Where does he go?
I still would have to go with the chalk, the Dodgers. But I would not be surprised by the Padres. I would be surprised by the Blue Jays, but the Padres really would not surprise me. And I don't know that a kid like this, you say, well, the owner's widow, the late owner's widow is suing the two brothers. I don't know that it's going to matter to Roki Sasaki. Maybe it should. And maybe if he's looking at the bigger picture, that's what he's looking at. But he also could say, listen, this is going to resolve. I'm going to be in San Diego. I'm going to be with you, Darvish. I'm going to be with a team that has been on the rise. So San Diego would not surprise me. Toronto would for the reasons that I said before.
Okay, last thing on this. Once Sasaki makes his decision, are there any free agents that he's affecting? Is it a Flaherty? Is it someone like that this decision is directly impacting? And as soon as he makes his decision, not only the younger, I mean, I know the Latin American guys with the free agency, but I'm talking big league free agents. Is he impacting anybody kind of the way other people said Shohei did, and this person does, and this person does, Soto does? Is there someone out there that you can pinpoint and say he's directly affecting his market?
At first, I thought the answer to that would be no, because remember, he can max out only at about 7 million or so. And I thought, well, what team would care if they're taking Sasaki? They can absorb any other pitcher that they might want into their payroll. But it's conceivable that a team might think, if we get Sasaki, that's one too many starting pitchers or enough that we don't want to go for another. So it's possible it is affecting a Flaherty or a Pivetta or somebody along those lines, and maybe even some of the other starting pitchers trickling down. Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, some of those guys. I do expect that once this is resolved, you'll see some movement on those guys. So there is an indirect effect. But as far as, wow, that team, if they don't get Sasaki, is getting Flaherty, I don't know that that's the case. It might turn out that way, but it doesn't seem to me that it should be, because let's face it, even if it's, just take the Chicago Cubs, for example. If they got Sasaki, why would that preclude them from getting Flaherty? Even though they have, yes, a deep group of starting pitchers, they could still have done more.
Because the Cubs are cheap, that's why. Because the Cubs are cheap. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, that's a different question. But again, Sasaki is cheap. Sasaki's only going to be 7.5 million at most. So what are we talking about here? If any team, forget the Cubs, any team in baseball can't afford that, that's ridiculous. That's not the reason why a team would be out on Sasaki.
That's less than some first round draft picks. So in situations like this, we take little morsels of anything, like following the plane to Toronto when it was Shohei. With Roki,
or when it's not going in the air, but whatever.
Right, exactly. With Roki, can we read in anything about the fact that when he met with the Dodgers, he didn't want any of the stars in the meeting? But now we hear, coming towards the end, that Manny and you were in his most recent meeting with San Diego. Is that a shift? Is that just like the next level? Like, hey, now I want to meet with stars? And is LA going to have a chance to meet with the stars too? Or meet the stars with him?
My perception of that, Eric, is that he narrowed it down. And once he narrowed it down, yes, then he was willing to meet with players on each of the finalists. I assume that happened with Toronto too. Don't know it for a fact. So with the Dodgers, yes, I would think the same thing would happen if one final meeting takes place. And I don't read anything into that other than that these teams are further along in the process and he wants to get a little more acclimated, perhaps with some of the players that would be his teammates.
All right, Ken, I'm going to take this and kind of spin it into the entire free agent market. There's 2 fan questions in the chat right now. I'll give you both of them because they're pretty similar. Robert in the chat says, how soon after Roki signs will San Diego, Seattle, Arizona start trading starters? This is kind of tied to what AJ was talking about. And then also Mantis with a question. This has probably been answered already, but why are there so many free agents left out there this close to spring training?
As for will those pitchers be traded that we've been talking about, depends on each individual circumstance. Yes, Arizona is going to trade a starting pitcher, most likely Jordan Montgomery, but they could open it up and perhaps consider Merrill Kelly too. I don't know that Seattle is ultimately going to trade a starter. Luis Castillo has been talked about, and certainly he has been available. So those trades could be somewhat contingent on this as well. And I'm actually glad that the listener asked that question, because while AJ talked about free agents, we should have also mentioned the trades that are options for these teams that might still be in need of starting pitching. What was the second question again, Scott?
The second question was just about the market in general. And, we
why
try not
so
to
many
do this
free
too
agents?
much, but it is mid-January. We actually, I think, have undersold it at this point.
I agree. Now, it's the way baseball free agency moves. It's not like any other sport, the salary cap sports, where it moves really quickly. Baseball free agency goes at its own pace. And I don't know if we're sitting here on January 14th, whether we have more free agents than usual, a typical number of free agents, both at the elite level or the top level and the mid and lower levels. It has been a case in recent years where free agency has dragged a bit. And it's dragged a bit even for certain top players. And we're seeing that again. We mentioned Flaherty and Pivetta. Santander is another one. Here's the list. And it's pretty significant, right? Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman. These guys, we would have expected them to be signed by now, as well as some of those other names, Tanner Scott in particular. So, again, it's the pace of baseball free agency. It goes at its own pace. There's no deadline. There's no clock. I know to fans, it can be a little bit annoying. To media, it can be a little bit annoying too. But the way the current system is set up, there's no way around it.
Ken, we just showed the board, and I think we're going to show it again here of the top, 40, 50 free agents and the ones that are left. Okay, Sasaki, we understand. We've heard a ton about Bregman. We've heard a ton about Alonso. We've heard a bunch about Santander. Jack Flaherty at 10, barely heard anything, right? Nick Pivetta. I don't think Nick Pivetta we've talked about at all. He turned down a qualifying offer. Should he have accepted the qualifying offer? Do you think that he looks back and says, man, maybe I should have taken that $21 million? Because right now, I haven't heard hide nor hair about him or really Jack Flaherty, and they're two of the best starting pitchers left on that board.
That's true. And I reported over the weekend that Flaherty ultimately might consider a shorter deal with opt-outs. The problem with that for him is that if he gets an opt-out after 1 year and then goes back into the market, he can get hit with a qualifying offer. And that is part of the problem Pivetta is having now. Teams value these draft picks. They factor that into what they're going to offer a player, and it is problematic in many cases. It's usually problematic, not for guys like Juan Soto, but for guys like Pivetta who are not necessarily elite free agents, but kind of mid-level. And that seems to be part of what is going on with him. Now, does he regret not taking the qualifying offer? Check back when he signs. We'll see what he signs. We'll see what he gets. I still expect him to get a multi-year, maybe not 5 years or 4, maybe it's 3, and maybe there are opt-outs, but I do expect him to do okay, not great. And maybe in each of those cases, Flaherty and Pivetta, once camp opens, if they're not signed by then, and the injuries start, and this always happens when camp starts, maybe then things will open up for them a little more. But I would not be surprised to see any of them sign within the next month either.
Ken, is this is what the Players Association has talked about since they've put qualifying offers on players, it holding down the value. Is this the case with Pivetta where the Red Sox were like, we don't think he's going to accept this, but if we do offer him this and some team does sign him, we get the draft pick, right? And it looks good to our fans that, hey, we offered this guy $20+ million to come back. He said no. This is a problem, right? Because I know the union has talked about this as, hey, we want to try to get rid of the qualifying offers. And they made different concessions in the last CBA. But this is a problem, correct?
It does factor into the way a player is evaluated by a team from a financial perspective. So, for instance, if you're thinking Nick Pivetta is worth, and I'm just going to throw these numbers out there, I'm not sure they're the right numbers. Let's say you think he's worth 3 years, $45 million. Well, but you're losing the draft pick. So maybe you value the draft pick at $7 or $8 million, so you offer $337, something like that. Again, those are rough numbers, but I'm just trying to give people some insight into how the process might work. It does diminish the value of a player. There's no question about it. It is a drag on the value of a free agent. Now, there have been various negotiations over the years, and one thing that's kind of relevant right now is the league offered during the last CBA negotiations to get rid of the qualifying offer if the union accepted an international draft, which Roki Sasaki, of course, would have been the number one pick in. The union has a lot of reasons it does not want an international draft, and it opposes it, and that was why it didn't get eliminated then. But this has been a subject of negotiation. They've changed, as you said, AJ, the rules over the years, the penalties involved. It's a problem, yes, for certain free agents, not the top ones. Those guys sign and teams lose their picks, and happily. But certainly it figures in with a guy like Pivetta. And guys like him in the past have had the same kind of issues.
Are there teams that are more likely to strike when these players go to 1-year deals? I think of the Brewers because I saw it, I watched it. Like, are certain teams more in position? Because when you get to like the 1-year deal for $21 million, everybody can do. There's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. But why are certain teams more likely to strike? And is there something that we can look to, like, hey, if this guy goes on, needs a 1-year deal, most likely it would be to this team?
Pirates.
In a general sense, teams are risk averse. Teams don't want to sign players long term, and that's why a shorter deal with opt-outs might be appealing to the clubs, and they're more willing. Certainly, it opens it up, Eric. There's not even a question in my mind that when, for instance, Jack Flaherty went from a guy seeking 5 to 6 years, which I assume is what he wanted and wants, ideally, to, okay, I'm open on a 3-year high average annual value with opt-outs. I assume that would bring more teams into the mix, simply because teams are terrified, sometimes legitimately and sometimes excessively, about going long-term with pitchers in particular. You certainly can understand that, but even with position players, they want as little risk as possible. And in a way, it's a shame because we know that, yes, players on the back ends of these kinds of deals are usually not as productive, but you want the player on the front end and you want to pay him and you want his production, and teams just say, well, we'd rather not because they're scared of years 4, 5, and 6. It doesn't factor for me. It doesn't exactly work the way it should, in my opinion.
All right, Ken, one more for you. There's been some talk in the chat about Alex Bregman because he still lingers on the market, and Susie and some others said, did you ever hear anything about an offer being upped from that original very public 6,156 for Bregman? I think some fans now of the Astros are looking back being like, oh, should they have actually waited and been less decisive, because he might have ended up going back there?
Well, it's a good question. And he certainly wanted more, and they did not go higher. That was their offer, 6,156, and that is where it stood. The question now is he going to do better than that? Because when you turn down that offer, obviously you want more. Or will he be kind of like Pete Alonso? Remember, Pete Alonso has told the Mets, I'll do a 3-year high AAV opt-outs. Does Bregman ultimately take that kind of deal, which worked out really well last year for Blake Snell and for Matt Chapman, ultimately, in the end? I don't know. And it's going to be really interesting if he does take the shorter guarantee to see whether in the end he makes it up in his next deal. Remember, he's a year older next year. He's going into his age 32 season instead of his age 31. And these things matter in free agency. So if Alex Bregman ends up, and I'm just throwing numbers out there again, 3 years, 90, and opts out, does he ultimately beat the 6,156 with the 1 year for 30 plus what he will get in the next deal? That is going to be the calculation. And again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Didn't work for Jordan Montgomery. And with Cody Bellinger, he took that kind of deal and stayed on that deal. So we'll see. But Bregman is obviously a really interesting case. We know what he turned down. We also know what Alonso turned down from the Mets prior to his last year of arbitration. So we'll judge and we'll see how these players make out, not just in this deal, but ultimately with the other deals they might sign later.
Now, AJ has said countless times he doesn't read your articles. Do you agree?
Oh, I agree. Yeah. He's not lying.
Yeah.
So then he probably doesn't watch Fair Territory either. Would you agree with that, AJ?
No chance.
Okay. On Fair Territory, Ken asked for an apology from you. Are you willing to give Ken an apology, or are you not going to give him an apology?
Show him the video. Let's see what
was the apology for? What was the apology for?
I'll see.
Please.
We'll see if Jared doesn't have it.
No, we
but
can't
the
get
video-
it like that. Kratz, you had to tell us what
Yeah,
it was.
tell us.
You can't
Like,
do
what did you
that.
say? Actually,
Kratz-
can you tell me what you
Kratz,
said?
we don't have a magic
Well, I'll tell
production
you, I'll be
team.
happy to
Little
tell you what
bow
you
tie wearing fella.
What I said was that Juan Soto in his deal was going to beat Shohei Ohtani's present day value, which was 460. I think I was right. Not only did he beat his present day value, he beat his overall value. And you said something like, "I'll never be on the show again if that happens." Well, I guess I'm still on the show, and I have not heard an apology.
I'm sorry that some people have more money than sense, Ken. How's that for an answer?
No, that's not
That's
an
pretty good.
apology.
No, that's pretty good.
I mean, that was my apology. I don't know. I said I'm sorry.
But
And
but
you were
I'm-
right. You know what? But as things were going, and I was hearing, because I also have sources that Ken doesn't have.
Ooh.
But
True.
as I was hearing things, I was being told that, like, these numbers are getting out of control. So, Ken, guess what? You were right. Way to go. For once in your life, I will say,
Yeah.
Ken, you were right.
I'll take that. One time is
Now,
good.
I
Please.
hope Shohei takes you out to dinner more times than you've taken me out to dinner.
Okay. Jeremy Meyer is our producer. I'm asking Jeremy to clip that. I want to show that every episode of Fair Territory. Can you?
Yeah.
Every episode. We're going to open
Fine.
up every episode with it.
That's fine.
We're
One
gonna
time,
put, we're
one
gonna put a
time.
montage together for tomorrow for our show as well. So
I love it.
you've got it. You've got a deal, Ken. Thank you. Good to see
Thanks,
you. We'll
guys.
catch you on Fair Territory.
Sounds good.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.